Deep in the Guyanese jungle, there is a silence that does not feel natural. It does not feel peaceful. It feels left behind. Locals still avoid it, not because of superstition, but because of memory. Because there are places where the land itself becomes associated with human collapse. Jonestown is one of them. A settlement that once held more than 900 people. A community that called itself an experiment in equality, safety, and justice. But those who escaped later described it differently. Not as a community, not even as a cult, but as a system that slowly replaced individual thought with collective obedience. Former resident Odell Rhodes, one of the few who survived, once said something that investigators could never forget. You didn't decide things there, you just stopped resisting decisions. That is the key. Because Jonestown was not built on violence, it was built on surrender. And surrender does not happen in one moment. It happens slowly, until you forget there was ever another option. At the center of it all was Jim Jones, a man who began as a preacher, and ended as the architect of one of the largest mass deaths in modern history. But Jonestown is not just about him. It is about how hundreds of people, each with their own doubts, fears, and instincts, ended up moving in the same direction, until there was no direction left at all. Before Guyana, before isolation, before the jungle. Jim Jones was already studying something far more dangerous than religion. He was studying influence. Former member Tim Carter, who later escaped Jonestown, described him like this. He didn't talk like a preacher. He talked like someone testing reactions. Jones built the People's Temple in the United States during the 1950s and 60s. On the surface, it was progressive, integrated, charitable, focused on racial equality and social support. That is why people joined. Not because they were vulnerable in a simple way, but because they believed they were part of something morally advanced. But inside the organization, something else was happening. Control was being slowly introduced, not through force, through normalization. Former member Annie Moore later explained, at first, it was just sharing struggles. Then it became confessing doubts. Then it became confessing thoughts you weren't even sure were real. This is important, because Jonestown did not start with physical control. It started with internal surveillance. People began policing their own thoughts. That is the first stage of psychological dependency. Not obedience to authority, but distrust of self. Confessions were not private, they were public. A mistake was not corrected privately, it was displayed. This created a feedback loop. Speak, confess, be judged, adjust behavior, repeat. Over time, people stopped distinguishing between belief and performance. And once belief becomes performance, it becomes controllable. When criticism in the US began increasing, Jones made a decision. He would leave. But he did not leave alone. He took the entire community with him. Guyana was presented as a sanctuary, a place free from racism, capitalism, and government interference. But survivor Stanley Clayton later said, "We thought we were leaving control behind. We didn't realize we were following it." Jonestown was remote, surrounded by jungle, cut off physically. But isolation was not the main mechanism. No independent media, no free contact, no outside verification, only internal information. And one central voice, Jim Jones. Days began early. Work was constant. Heat was oppressive. But physical conditions were only background noise. The real structure of control was auditory. Speakers were installed across the settlement. Jones could speak at any time. Residents described it as a voice that never left the air. Sometimes it gave instructions, sometimes encouragement, sometimes accusations, sometimes warnings of external threats. This created constant psychological presence. Even when he was not physically there, he was still present cognitively. White nights were emergency drills, but they were not just drills. They were psychological conditioning events. Jones would announce, poisoning threat, government attack, internal betrayal. And residents were instructed to gather. Then came the ritual. A liquid would be presented. People were told to drink it. Sometimes it was fake, sometimes it was not. Survivor Odell Rhodes described one of these events. I remember thinking, if this is the end, why does it feel rehearsed? After enough cycles, fear becomes procedural, not emotional. Congressman Leo Ryan arrived with journalists and relatives. At first, Jonestown appeared functional, clean paths, organized community life, smiling residents. But journalists began noticing inconsistencies. During private conversations, some residents whispered, "We can't leave freely." That statement changed everything. Because it meant the system was not voluntary, it was structural. Ryan decided to leave with defectors. That decision triggered the collapse, not immediately, but irreversibly. News travels fast inside Jonestown, not through phones, not through media, but through people. When Jim Jones learns that Congressman Leo Ryan is preparing to leave with defectors, something inside the settlement shifts. Not immediately in action, but in tone. Survivor Tim Carter later described it like this. It wasn't panic at first. It was like the system suddenly stopped feeling stable. Because Jonestown was not held together by walls. It was held together by belief in consequences. And now consequences were leaving. If people leave and speak, the illusion collapses. And Jones understood that fully. The airstrip is not inside Jonestown, it is outside, which is important, because outside is where control becomes fragile. On November 18, Ryan's group arrives at Port Katuma airstrip. The atmosphere is tense but still structured. People are packing, equipment is being loaded, journalists are filming, defectors are preparing to leave. For the first time in years, some residents are stepping into the possibility of exit. Survivor Patricia Parks later said, "I remember thinking I was finally safe. That feeling didn't last long, because Jonestown members arrive, armed, not as individuals, but as a coordinated unit. There is no negotiation, no warning, just sudden collapse of order into violence. Gunfire begins. Chaos spreads instantly across the airstrip. People run in different directions, but the environment is open, jungle runway, nowhere to truly escape. Congressman Leo Ryan is killed, so are members of his team. Because now Jonestown is no longer isolated, it is responsible. And inside the settlement, that realization triggers something irreversible. When news of the airstrip attack reaches Jonestown, it does not arrive as panic. It arrives as structure failure. Jim Jones begins speaking rapidly into the loudspeaker system. Recordings from this moment exist. They are fragmented, inconsistent.
How very much I've tried my best to give you a good life. But in spite of all of what I've tried, a handful of our people, with their lives, have made our life impossible.
He shifts between tones, urgency, justification, fear, control, collapse. At one moment he says, "They will come for us now. There is no other outcome." Residents are called to the central pavilion. Not all at once emotionally, but all at once structurally. Because that is how Jonestown works. When authority calls, you respond, even when you no longer fully understand why. The atmosphere is heavy, not dramatic, compressed. He begins speaking about inevitability, about external threats, about survival through unity. And then he introduces the final concept, revolutionary suicide. A framing mechanism. Not just for death, but for meaning. Because meaning is what makes the unbearable seem structured. Barrels are brought forward, liquid is prepared, children are positioned first. This is not chaos yet, it is procedure. Survivor Odell Rhodes later said, "What I remember most is how quiet it was at the beginning, like everyone was waiting for permission to react." That is the critical psychological detail, because reaction had been conditioned out over time. When authority is consistent enough, people stop generating alternatives internally. Not everyone complies. Some resist, but resistance is not loud, it is fragmented. Odell Rhodes refuses. Tim Carter begins to disengage mentally. Stanley Clayton makes a decision to leave. Clayton later described it, "I didn't decide to escape. I just stopped accepting instructions as reality." He runs into the jungle. No plan, no certainty, just separation from the system. This is important. Survival is not heroism in Jonestown, it is cognitive disconnection. Inside the pavilion, Jones becomes increasingly unstable. Recordings suggest he is exhausted, fragmented, alternating between control and collapse. At times he speaks as leader, at times as observer, at times almost as if listening to himself from outside. He repeats phrases, he contradicts himself, he loses coherence. Eventually, he is found dead in the pavilion, gunshot wound to the head. Most evidence suggests suicide, but the exact sequence of final seconds remains uncertain due to chaos. What is clear is this: the system ended where it began, centered entirely on him. When the events in the pavilion finally end, Jonestown does not immediately feel like over. It feels like paused, because there is no single switch that turns a system like this off. There are only fragments left behind. Silence spreads across the settlement, but it is not clean silence. It is interrupted silence, footsteps in the dirt, voices in distance, people realizing that something irreversible has happened, but not yet fully understanding the scale. Survivor Odell Rhodes later described the moment like this: "It didn't feel real. It felt like the world had stopped updating." That feeling is important, because trauma in Jonestown is not processed in real time. It is processed in fragments after reality breaks. When outside teams finally reach Jonestown, they are not prepared for scale. More than 900 bodies, spread across multiple zones, pavilion walkways, residential structures, open fields. Many are grouped. Some are isolated. Some are still together as families. Investigators describe a disturbing pattern. There is no single focal point of collapse. It happened everywhere, at the same time. Early reports struggle with classification. Was it mass suicide, mass coercion, psychological collapse, or structured control ending in fatal compliance. There is no clean legal category that fits perfectly. This is where survivor testimony becomes critical, because documents do not explain emotional state. Rhodes repeatedly emphasizes one idea. You didn't feel like you were choosing, you felt like you were continuing something already decided. He escaped during final confusion, not during a clear moment of decision. Stanley Clayton. Clayton's escape through jungle terrain becomes one of the key survival narratives. He later said, "Once I left the loudspeakers, I started thinking again. That's when I realized I was still alive." This detail is critical for understanding Jonestown psychologically. Thinking itself was suppressed by environment, not physically removed, but structurally replaced. Tim Carter. Carter's testimony focuses on gradual conditioning. Nothing felt like a breaking point while it was happening. It only becomes a breaking point when you're already outside of it. Jim Jones is found dead in the pavilion. Gunshot wound to the head. Most analysis concludes suicide. However, exact timing unclear. Final interactions fragmented. Leadership structure already collapsing before his death. Other key members of People's Temple. Many die during final sequence. Some die in airstrip events. No organized leadership survives. The organization ends completely. There is no continuation branch. No successor ideology. Only aftermath. Survivors do not return to normal life quickly. Many experience PTSD, dissociation, guilt for surviving, inability to explain experience to outsiders. One recurring theme in survivor interviews: people want a simple explanation. There isn't one. Others become long-term advocates for cult awareness and psychological manipulation education. But almost all share one thing: Jonestown does not end in 1978 for them. It continues internally for decades. Today, Jonestown no longer functions as a settlement. It has been reclaimed by jungle. Structures have collapsed or disappeared under vegetation. There are remnants of foundations, scattered artifacts and overgrown pathways, but no active community, no permanent residents. Access is difficult due to geography and conditions. Locals generally avoid it, not due to myth, but due to historical association. There is no major tourist infrastructure, no developed memorial site on location itself. Jonestown exists now more as an absence than a place. A space the jungle slowly erased. Jonestown no longer exists physically, but it remains present in psychology research, cult behavior studies, survivor testimony archives, and documentary history. And in one more place, human memory of how easily certainty can replace questioning. The jungle has reclaimed the ground, but the pattern remains visible in history, not as a place, but as a warning. Because Jonestown did not happen in isolation, it happened through people who, one step at a time, stopped stepping back. And if you made it all the way to the end, seriously, thank you. Videos like this take a huge amount of time to research, write, and put together. Especially stories like Jonestown, where every detail matters and every testimony still affects real people decades later. I'm trying to build something here. Not just quick videos, but real documentaries people actually remember after they finish watching. So if you want to support the channel, leave a like, subscribe, maybe comment what case you want covered next, because I read all of them. Take care. Bye.